Good morning. I am Joni Robbins, and I am the Purchasing Director at the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And I welcome the conversation that we will engage in this morning. So we are going to go ahead and get started. These are pictures of the different divisions within NCDOT. We have the Division of Highways, we do aviation. We also have DMV, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. We also have a rail division. We also manage the ferries and the ports and the turnpikes, which more about towards the toll roads. And we also have the Global Transpark, as well as integrated mobility. So this morning, we want to talk about the rules of state procurement, registration with the state. We're going to talk about the EVP, which is the electronic vendor portal, talk through some purchasing methods, what is seeking competition. We're also going to talk about some solicitation methods, evaluations, how are they evaluated. We're going to talk about the award process as well as contract monitoring. Let's get started. We are going to cover rules and laws. What are the differences between them as pertaining to purchasing for the state? What's considered a good and what's considered a service? When we say delegations, what do we mean? And what about policy? And we're also going to talk about the different types of contracts. So I just want to start with kind of the hierarchy for state purchasing. We have to your left the North Carolina General Statutes, which are really the laws that are enacted. And then we have what we call administrative code, which is the rules. We call them the rules, which helps us enact the laws that are put on the books for North Carolina. And then from the administrative code, we have a procurement manual, and that's really talking about policy. It identifies like the course of actions that the agencies are going to use in following the rules. So we have the law, then we have the rules, and then we have policy on how we're going to do that. And then we have the procurement manual that's to your top to the right. That is the we have two state oversight agencies for non-IT. That is the Department of Administration Division of Purchase and Contracts. So they, for non-IT items, have a overall procurement manual that is applicable to all the agencies. At least in community colleges, some things are applicable to universities as well. And then on the IT side, there's also a statewide IT office that has a procurement manual that is specific to IT purchases. And so from those overarching agencies, IT and non-IT, then it goes down to that bigger square there, which is the agency purchasing manual. So the agency purchasing manual cannot override the statewide manual. So that is more procedural. So for NCDOT, my purchasing manual talks about procedures, how are we going to complete the task. It's more the day-to-day standard operating procedure types of information that's in that document. Then I want to talk about also the purchasing authority. I spoke just a moment ago about purchasing contracts, which is the division of purchasing contracts, which is a part of the Department of Administration. And these are non-IT. They get their authority to do that for goods and services under General Statute 143, Article 3. And for the rules, the administrative code is found in Title 1, Chapter 5. You can Google these and you will see that information there in detail. And for the IT side of the house, we also, for goods and services, that information is found in General Statute 1, Chapter 147. Administrative code for that is in Title 9, Chapter 6. And I also added the state construction because that's a little different. And of course, construction is about the renovation or the alteration of physical properties that belong to the state. And that information is in our general statutes chapters that you see listed there, 116, 143, and 153. And they also have a separate state construction manual that talks about, again, the procedures that they actually go through to complete their work. So who are the potential customers? What opportunities are there to work with the state? And so we have identified that we have 28 executive state agencies within the state. Um, sorry. And we also have 58 community colleges, 16 public universities, over 2,500 public and charter schools. There are 100 counties in the state of North Carolina and over 500 municipalities. So that's a whole lot of opportunity in which you can find work for the goods and or services that you would like to offer to the state. This slide is really a representation of the listing of state agencies and the support organizations for the state. If you look in the right-hand column, if it says cabinet there, the agency head or the secretary, and as most of them are called, are appointed by the governor. So for the Department of Administration, Secretary Caswell is an appointment by the governor. If you look a little further down that right-hand column, it says council. Those agencies heads, those are secretaries, are elected officials. Those are the ones that we go to the ballot and select who we think best represents our ideas and what we need. And then at the last are those supporting agencies, departments that are out there as well. So let's talk about need identification. How is need identified? So first, the agency has to answer a couple of questions. What are you buying, right? How much does it cost? Does the division have the funding? Do we have to have the money, right? How do we buy it? What process are we going to use? And what is the needed documentation? So those are some of the things that we are asking ourselves. And so the purchasing procedures are determined by pretty much some of the same things, like what are you buying and how much does it cost? That tells us what process we need to use in order to procure that good and or service. Is it a good? Is it a service? What are the delegations? So we're going to talk a little bit more about delegations. Also, is it a mandated resource out there for the procurement of that good and or service, or are we going to do what we call a competitive process or put it on the open market? So goods, those are commodities, things that are really tangible. And the one important thing to remember about that in the selling of goods to the state, there is a vendor charge of 1.75%. And again, those are just a couple of pictures of things that are tangible, things you can really hold. Then we have the services side, and those are the intangible work or tasks that typically performed by an individual or company, and it really requires some expertise, specialized knowledge, and experience to the similar capabilities for which we are seeking that service. And just a picture of a guy there, looks like he's doing some plumbing. So that is a service because that requires specialized knowledge, some experience, and some expertise. As well as this power washing as well. Same thing, requires some expertise, some specialized knowledge, and some experience. So we'll talk about agency delegation. Each state agency, university, or college has a set purchasing amount in which is approved by the state procurement officer, who is the head of the division of purchasing contracts for non-IT goods and services. And then on the IT side, there's a similar person who is also the head of that procurement office as well. Those two individuals have the authority that comes with the position to set general purchasing delegations for agencies, the community college and the university, unless it's exempted by law. So for purchases that are under the delegation, and for most of the agencies and community college, that amount right now is $50,000. So when we purchase things that are under $50,000, they are processed and executed within the agency, and it doesn't have to go outside of the agency. If we do purchases over the delegation, unless we have a special exemption. So I know at NCDOT, we have several special exemptions, and those exemptions are typically given and they are approved by, again, the state purchasing officer, whether that's IT or non-IT goods and services. And they are really, when they look at exemptions and giving those to the agencies or the community college or university, that is saying typically it is if that particular good or service is really expertise of your agency, and generally your agency is the agency that buys that all the time. That's what you do. You've done it for years. For example, for NCDOT, obviously, the one thing that comes to mind when you think of DOT is the highways, right? So what are those goods and services that we need that helps us be able to build and maintain the state highways? And so we have several aggregate, we have several beddings, dirt, uh, grime that we put on them. Sorry, I'm getting a little tongue tied here. Grime that we put out on the road. So those are things that are specific to NCDOT. We buy them. There are, in some cases, there are special requirements that you have to met. They have to be authorized or pre-approved in order for the supplier to have to be able to provide that to NCDOT. So because we're good at what we do with that, and because we're the only agencies that do that, then NC Division of Purchase and Contract has determined and approved us to be able to buy those things. And we spend well over $50,000 on those, as you can imagine. And so we don't have to send those over for their review and approval. We're able to handle those within the agency. So, but for the other items that we don't have special delegations for or special exemptions for, then if that delegation, that amount that we're spending is over the $50,000, then we are required to send it to PNC for non-IT and for items for their review and approval prior to award. So we know the things that we have to send over for them to take a look at, and really what they're looking at is they're making sure that the process that we used, that we followed those administrative codes that we talked about earlier, right? And that we followed the procurement manual. We did the process the way it was outlined according to law or administrative code that it needs to be followed, right? So that's what they're looking for. As long as they can check that box, they're going to turn around and send us an approval to move forward with the award, and the agency or the community college would actually do the award. Those oversight agencies are really just reviewing the process you used in order to make the recommendation for the award. So this is a example of a purchasing policy, and because I work at NCDOT, this is really pertaining to NCDOT. If you're talking to another agency or community college or university, it may look slightly different because within certain dollar values, you can do some things differently. So for NCDOT, if it's a purchase that is less than $10,000, we consider that to be a micro purchase. And we encourage the use of the state credit card, which is the P card, the procurement card. And so those items very seldom come through my office because, again, they are bought at the different divisions or business units, and they're bought using the P card. If it's $10,001 and more, or up to $25,000, it's considered a small purchase here at NCDOT, whether it's a good or service. We do require, that is an informal vendor quote. We need at least one. And we also encourage that we, in this category, that we seek HUB certified vendors for those purchases. And you would see that in most cases, those are, you will receive an RFQ. So that'll go straight to the vendor because competition is not required at that level. And so it'll be an email going out. So it's really important that you make sure that you are correctly identified in terms of the commodity codes that you're using, that you have selected for your business. And then for that 25,001 and up to $50,000, we consider that to be our informal process, goods or services. At this level, competition is required, but we do not have to advertise it. That means that we can go out and get 3 quotes, right? We can call vendors straight and ask them, email them. We are required to for the vendor to agree to our terms and conditions, the NCT&Cs, those are terms and conditions. So we will be using our documents for purchases that are within that range, because we need you to agree to the terms and conditions. And so again, we are always encouraging and support that we utilize hub vendors in these categories as well. For the $50,000 and one and over, that's really a formal process. And whether it's goods or services, advertisement is required. We are asking the vendor to agree to North Carolina terms and conditions. So obviously we will be using our documents for that, because our T's and C's are attached to our solicitation documents. If there is a waiver of competition, is what we call it, in place, and we could talk about that. We are going to talk about that a little later to explain what that is. So it has to be advertised if it's $50,000 or more, or it has to have an approved waiver in place. And again, we'll talk about what the waiver is and how that is used. For NCDOT, the contract term is typically 3 years. Any contract that we want to go into, and we do have some that are longer than 3 years, we are required to get the state purchasing officer's approval to do so. Most contracts are for 1 year with 2 one-year optional renewals. That is pretty much the standard, but there are contracts that have different timeframes in that. For contracts that's estimated over $1 million, they are reviewed by, for NCDOT, our legal team. My staff engages legal folks to make sure that certain things are in place for those, as well as when obviously it has to be reviewed by purchasing and contracts, division of purchasing and contracts, and they will also have their legal team take a look at it as well. And so that legal review would take place prior to the advertisement and prior to the actual award. So let's talk about a standard contract and what that is. The basic definition is what you see there. Is binding agreement between the purchaser and the vendor to buy and sell certain commodities, right, at certain prices and under certain stipulated terms and conditions, right? The standard term contract can either be mandatory or convenience, and it will state which one it is. These are standard term contracts. They're really established for the use of all agencies or in community college and universities, unless they are exempted by statute, rule, or special terms and conditions that's specific to that contract. All that information, if that's applicable, would be there in that term contract information. So we think the benefits for having state term contracts are that we are able to get lower pricing. We also believe that we are seeking out the best quality products in that way as well, because it is a competitive process as well. And we also are able, in most cases, to get shorter delivery times. For agency-specific term contract, it is really kind of the same thing as a standard term contract, with the exception of it's specific to the agency. So for NCDOT, one of the things, again, that we buy asphalt, right? We buy aggregate, which is rocks, really. So we buy asphalt, which is the tar, that you see on the road. So we do have agency-specific term contracts, because most other agencies are not buying asphalt, right? Is NCDOT, we buy a lot of those. And so of that. And so we need to, it makes sense for us that we're not having to, put a contract in place each time we do that. So we have an agency specific term contract to cover those types of things. They are all indefinite quantity, which means we're not guaranteeing that we're going to buy any specific amount. And then the award is typically based on historical data. That basically means that does it make sense to have an agency term contract in place, right? If we buy enough of these items, if we have more than one a division and or business unit that are buying the same kind of product, then it may, based on historical data, make sense to have a agency specific term contract in place for that. And again, these are standard 3 years. If they're longer than that, it still requires the same approval as any other contract. Let's talk about contractual services. And so this really, again, kind of what we talked about in services is where you are going to contract with the individual who's going to perform a specific task, and that task typically requires specialized knowledge, some skills and experience as well. So there are some examples that are listed there that gives you some idea what will fall under a contractual service contract. And then we have what we call a consultant contract, which are tasks that are performed by, still require specialized knowledge and expertise. But these are contracts in which we hire individuals or companies to investigate a problem or look at a project, and they're going to come back and provide us with some advice, right? They're going to analyze something, they're going to review it, and they're going to come back and get and share with us their finding. They're not going to actually do the work, right? So the folks who do the work, those are contractual service contracts. If we're consulting with you, you're going to provide us with information, some advice, some direction, some recommendations. Those are consultants. Those consultant contracts have to be approved by the governor's office. It's a seamless process to the vendor. It is incorporated in our award and review process with the Division of Purchase and Contracts. So you won't even see that. It is just part of our internal process, and we do it quite frequently. Some agencies do it more so than others. So for NCDOT, for DIT, this is the Department of Information Technology. Again, obviously they cover all the IT purchases for the state. And again, those are, you see they're listed, the general statute that covers those purchases. And it could be hardware, software, database subscriptions. There are always license agreements that's connected to these purchases. And they also have a statewide IT procurement office that goes through the same review and approval process that the Division of Contract does for non-IT items. So I mentioned waivers of competition earlier. And so this is the review and approval process that has to be in place if we are going to, for a purchase amount that is required, that competition is required. If you have a specific reason and they're not just arbitrary, there is, if you go to Administrative Code 05B.1401, there is a list about 12 to 15 conditions in which you must meet in order to be able to get approval for a waiver of competition. Competition is the cornerstone of public procurement. And so we all are required to document. You can't just say that, something is true. It has to be documented. I'm so serious about it that in my office, it matters not about the amount of money that you're spending. If we're going to request a waiver or competition, if that is requested of us, then I have dictated in my office that I want to see all of those. So there are certain purchases that are below a certain amount. I don't look at them. They're approved by my deputy and have some supervisors in place as well. So they're covered there. But regardless of the amount, if it's a waiver, I want to see it because, again, competition is the cornerstone of public procurement. So we are saying that we can't compete something. I want to understand what that is, and I want to agree that the documentation in place to justify that if we're ever having to provide information to after award to anyone that's asking. So, Carla, we're at the first point of questions. Are there any?
There are no questions. There are no questions in the chat.
Okay.
And so we can proceed on if you, yes.
Thank you. So we're going to switch gears a little bit here and move into the process you need to follow if you want to do business with the state. We're going to talk about the electronic vendor portal, how to register an EVP, and we're going to talk about managing your EVP account. So the North Carolina Electronic Vendor Portal, as we fondly call EVP, it's a free registration. It helps the vendor to keep your information updated. It's an automated business opportunity notification system. So for those commodity codes that you have identified associated with the goods and or services that you want to do business with the state for, when those type of opportunities are available and posted in EVP, you will get an automatic notification to go out and take a look at that and see if that's something that you're willing and able to provide and do for the state. We see it as a one-stop registration to receive purchase orders, notifications, as I just said, and we're also able to do a vendor search there. The benefits of the new EVP system is, again, it is we think it's an improved and simplified process that allows you, the vendor, to do multiple functions in one platform. You can register, you can review and submit bid opportunities. You also can register for hub certifications, as well as you can view the bid tabulations and the award information that's posted there. We think it's easier for the purchasers to find qualified vendors since businesses are not able to enter more detailed commodity codes and upload larger files. So I think it's a win-win for the state and for the vendor. So a few EVP basics. The takeaway I think from the slides are that it's a single cloud-based application. It provides a single source, single point of access and to all of the North Carolina government organizations. But as a reminder, that 1.75% fee is for goods only, The EV registration, obviously you need internet access. You're gonna have to provide your federal ID or your EIN number there, and you will also, of course, need to have a valid email address. And so you're going to receive this presentation, and so that you see the link there for job aids, and you can go there and be able to get the help. There's also the help desk number or their email is provided there as well. If you need if you have some additional questions, they will be able to help you. So managing your account, it provides some information or direction on how you change your EVP password. You can update your profile information there, add, delete, or edit contact information, as well as if there's a need to update your name, you can do that there and edit or add a location as well. And again, there is a link there that will help you with that. So some of what we think are a few questions that frequently asked questions that we get, why are we having to pay the 1.75% fee? It offsets the expense of having to develop and we maintain this electronic process. So there is a cost to that. It allows the state to conduct business electronically, and it also enables you vendors to be able to market your business with the state entities and process. We think you benefit also from the process and the time savings that are made possible through the EVP system. How does your company benefit by using EVP? Again, it's a cost savings, we think, in the areas of processing, marketing, and administrative costs. We also think that it helps us on our side with order accuracy and consistency. And also, it's a single point of access to all government entities, the public schools, and the community college. So it increased the access to the North Carolina government market that's out there. Are there any questions on this section?
So we do have a few questions floating in the chat regarding commodity codes. One was, why do I get wrong bids? The other one is, where do you get the codes from? And so I just want to say that I did post a link to a training that will help you regarding selecting commodity codes and understanding exactly what they are and how to apply them to your goods or services. And so with that link to the training, I think that will help answer the questions about commodity codes. Joni, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's perfect.
Okay. All right. And let's see. Chanel has asked the question, if we have a sale and usage license, will it be entered there? And are you, Chanel, if you want to unmute and clarify, are you speaking of, will it be entered in EVP? All right. I do have a hand raised. Joni, 2 hands raised. Let's see, who do we have? Wiley Purcell or Purcell Wiley, if you want to unmute and answer your question.
Yeah, my name is Purcell. My name is Purcell Wiley.
Thank you.
How do you apply the 1.75% of what?
Of the amount of the purchase order for the goods that are being purchased.
Okay, it's only when you actually get the award you have to pay the fee. Okay.
Yes, yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have Martina.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm unable to leave a message in the chat. It says you can't send messages because you are not a member of the chat. Is there something that can be done about that so I can put in some questions?
Well, we will try in the background, Martina. I'm not quite sure. I have someone in the background that will check into that.
All right, thank you.
And next question is from 3 the Hard Way, if you want to unmute.
Yes, my name is Tiffany, and I always have problems with the EP system because it sends me codes to construction. When I'm an event planner, it always sends me codes for construction.
Yes,
and I was trying to figure out can I correct that, because I keep getting all these bids for construction, and I'm not in the construction business.
Yes. And so I have placed a link in the chat to assist. It is a link to training on commodity codes and selecting those codes. We also have our EVP help desk that is available to answer questions regarding selecting the commodity codes. And so I'll put that number in the chat also.
Thank you, because I've been on it like almost a year now, and it's only been sending me codes for construction businesses.
Yes, it is the codes that if those were selected, that those are the type emails that you would receive. And so it sounds like a matter of going in and reviewing the codes that have been selected and then reselecting codes that pertain to what you do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And so if you've had your question answered, if you would lower your hands. And I have one more question that we will address, and that is from Martin. If you want to unmute and ask your question.
Yes, we sell insulation material. What I see on the portal is that they are looking for actually installing insulation material, not for the material itself. We don't install, we just sell the material. What can you advise me to do?
When you say you see it on the portal, are you talking in EVP?
Correct. What is solicited is we need insulation for refurbishing this department or this whatever, but it requires the installing of the insulation, and we just sell the material.
Okay. So what I would recommend, there should be a contact person on that solicitation. It may be that they're looking for installation for that particular solicitation, but you may want to record the contact for that particular bid and maybe contact them later and see how you can get in on actually purchasing the material. So it's a matter of binding those solicitations for contacts and making contacts and networking with them so that you can get in at the level that you need to.
And I'm not trying to be evil here, but they never pick up the phone.
It's possible, but I would email or just that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just keep trying, and that is what it takes.
I hear you. Thank you.
Yes. All right. No more questions, Joni. Let's roll.
Thank you. So we're going to next talk about, in this section, we're going to talk about mandated resources, special provisions, and we're going to talk about a little bit about HUB certification. Again, you have the HUB, so we have the HUB certification department on who's hosting this, so they certainly have more to give you in that direction than I ever could. So for mandated resources, before any of the state entities buy anything, we are required to consider if there are any mandated resources. In other words, have there been an identified supplier or source that we have to buy these products from, right? So in that case, remember we talked about state term contracts. They can either be convenience or mandatory. If the state term contract is identified as mandatory, then for the items that are connected with that contract, either the good and or service, then we are required to buy it from the vendors that are on that state term contract. So I encourage you to also pay attention to the state term contracts solicitations that are coming out, and they will be from the Department of Administration, Division of Purchase and Contracts, because they are the administrators of the state term contracts, and so they are the ones who will be putting out solicitations for those. It would be great if you can get on those, because again, they for those that are designated as mandatory, then the government entities are required to buy from them. We also have our correction enterprise, which typically are, work that's done by our inmate population. And then we also have the state and federal surplus property, mail service center, state construction office, state property office. And then we also, there is some instances in which state agencies work with each other to provide a service, more likely, maybe some goods, and we don't do a solicitation, obviously, because we're both state agencies. Those that relationship is managed by what we call a memorandum of understanding, or MOU, or you may see it as a MOA, a memorandum of agreement. And so that's what those stand for. And then our historically underutilized businesses, obviously, that information is there. The hub participation for both construction spending and goods and services is at 10% for each of the agencies. And obviously, we'd love to do more than that, but we're all striving to hit that 10%. The hubs you are identified in EVP as your designation as a hub certified vendor that is useful for the agencies and the community colleges when we are out actually seeking for that area in which we don't have to, that purchasing boundaries in which we don't have to advertise. And so we're able to work directly with the vendors. Then we are looking for, my team is required to look, and they all are encouraged to do so for hub vendors. So it's really important to have a certification and to make sure that you are correctly identified in terms of the commodity codes that's associated with the goods and or services that you would like to provide to the state. And so in all our solicitations, you will see additional hub language that encourage the use of them. And we also do some, the bid postings are also notified in different other agencies or business units. We share that for NCDOT. We also share our postings with the Office of Civil Rights. And I know the hub office covers those as well. A hub plan, this is just an example of one. This is one that NCDOT has had previously. We just kind of, which is very similar to a slide that I showed earlier for that small market purchase category. Again, the P card is authorized for those. We are working with our business units and divisions to help identify hub vendors that fall in that category. And the same for the rest of the purchasing ranges that are listed there for hub. Are there any questions on this section?
I am going, so there's a question in the chat. Is there a way or process to have a commodity code added to the database for a service for which there is currently no code?
I don't know the answer to that one, caller. I would advise them to, that may be something that you could take back and speak to the Division of Purchase and Contracts with about,
Sure.
Because that would be more something that they could help with in terms of maybe looking at NIGP to see if there's any suggestions from that.
Sure. We do have a couple of hands raised. Lindell, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Good morning. My question is, when you talk on mandate resource contract, that if you're in North Carolina, my question is to you, how do I see a bid that already maybe been, or y'all not offering that bid to the inmate? Why I'm asking, because we survive a good, we in the natural sanitary napkin business, but I cannot find no contract that y'all did with in the previous that I know y'all purchased this for the university and different things, but I cannot find no contract where y'all maybe offered that bid.
So I would, so if I'm understanding your question correctly, you offer a product that, for instance, you are certain that the universities and the correction systems will be purchasing. However, you have not been able to see a solicitation that's asking for submissions to offer that good to the state. Is that your question, basically?
Yes, ma'am. That's
Okay.
exactly what I'm asking for.
So it would depend on a couple of things. We have a lot of state term contracts out there, and some of those are those intimate kinds of products that you're talking about. So that's one reason that I say you need to if it's a state term contract offer, then that would be posted. If you look at the contract that would have that item, whatever the item is on it, that contract would tell you the contract period. So when is it coming up for to be bidded again, to be competed again. And then there's also a contract administrator name and number of contact information that's listed on each of the contracts. I would reach out to that individual and ask them that question, right? And let them know. I would ask the question, is there an opportunity to be added to the contract? Some cases, the answer would be no, and until that window of competition or new solicitation is going out, and in some cases it is possible. So I would ask the question. You lose nothing in asking that question. The other thing that I would do is I would reach out specifically to those agencies that you believe offer opportunities for your good and or your service, and ask them how are they soliciting for that particular item. So all of the state agencies are listed. You can Google them, and there's a point of contact. There is in my office, I have a hub vendor liaison on my staff, Nicole Giammi. So I'm not sure if Nicole's on a call or not, but if she's not called, if you would mind, please put her contact information in the chat, and you can reach out to her, and she can help you try to identify the correct person, because most of the agencies, again, have a hub liaison as well. So at the minimum, Nicole would be able to help you know or get in contact with the hub liaison that's working specifically with the agency that you have the question for. So we can, those would be my suggestions for that one.
Okay, thank you so much, because that's what I'm looking for. At least be able to see,
of course,
the contract, but I can't find nobody that even showed that y'all ever had the contract. But so
yes,
that's
we'll reach out to Nicole. Let's see, we can
Okay.
get you some information.
All right, thank you so much.
You're certainly welcome.
So my name is Faith McKnight, and I'm the owner of Sweet Truth Bakery and Catering LLC. So I've already bid on a contract. I've been Hub certified for 6 years, and I never knew that I could bid on these bread and cookie contracts that y'all have until recently, and I came very close to getting in the last bid. But my thing is this: when you keep bidding with these big companies, that's like trying to oust the sitting president. And for small businesses, it's very hard for us to compete with these big companies, like, these big bread companies. So my thing is, if I'm Hub certified and I'm certified as a small business, I have 2 certifications. How does that really help us get any of these bids? Because it's very hard for the small business to compete with these big companies, and especially they're not even in state, they're out of state.
So Carla, can you, I'm sorry, it was just really hard for me to hear her question.
Oh, you couldn't hear me?
I could hear parts of it, but it just wasn't real clear. If the basis of what I understand your question is that how do we as small businesses compete with the larger companies that are out there? And why is it beneficial for you to be HUB certified or identified as a historically underutilized business if you can't compete with the larger firms? Is that the gist of your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you said, you also mentioned especially there are out of state companies that are getting the awards. So
Yes,
we're going to talk a little later about an opportunity for you to, if you're a North Carolina company and you're within a certain percentage or amount of a awarded, then you can identify that you want to have an opportunity to price match, but you have to do that upfront in submitting your offer to be able to, for the awarding agency to be able to come back. And if you fall within that dollar amount or that percentage within the lowest bid, and then you will have an opportunity to match that price, right? So we'll talk about that a little further, but I do think that it is and will always be beneficial to identify yourself as a historically underutilized business, because there are those categories in which we're not required to advertise, right? So we can work specifically straight with the vendor, but you have to be properly identified and you have to be responsive, right? We are providing, the purchasing offices, regardless of where they are, what agency, or whether they're in the community college or the university, we are working as the adversary really for our end users, right? My team do not actually use aggregate, right? We don't actually do a plain repair. We are working with those end users, right? The people who don't actually use the product or the service to get what they need to get that product or service. So, and they're working on a timeline, and they're working on some goals, and there have some, there's some things that are dependent upon them being able to get the good and or service in a timely manner that allows them to complete that task that they need to do. So I say that to say that you need to make sure that your contact information is current, and you need to make sure that you are checking, and you need to make sure that you're being responsive. So we do promote and encourage the use of historically underutilized businesses. But I will have to say, frankly, our biggest challenge have been just getting responses from them, right? We do reach out, but we don't always get a response. And so we're having to, again, we are expected to complete a procurement within a certain period of time, because again, other people are waiting on those services and our goods in order to complete the task. So I do think that it is very beneficial to be identified as a HUB vendor, because there are many purchases that are made that are not advertised. And even though they're a smaller amount of contracts, but if you're a small business and you get enough $24,000 contracts, I think, it could help you tremendously, right? Even if you get a whole lot of $15,000 contracts, that also can be a great boost for your business. Yes, I do also recognize that it's hard for a small company to compete with a larger one. If we are in a category in which we have to advertise, then we will state in our solicitation how we are going to evaluate and how we are going to award. So what I would advise you in that instance is to seek, do some networking. What other companies are out there that are small as you are, HUB identified, certified? And is there any networking opportunity in which you can come together and provide something and can be competitive? So I do appreciate what you said, and I know that happens, but we just have to put a strategy in place on how we can be a stronger candidate. And one, we're going to talk about price matching in just a few moments. that's one category that's available. That's one option that's available for you. And then we encourage the networking piece of it as well. And also making sure that you are checking and that you are properly identified and that you are being responsive. So that is what Ms. McKnight, that I would say to your questions. I do appreciate what your question, because I do understand that it is hard out there. But we have to have a plan in place on how we're gonna push this thing forward.
Well, can I just respond to your answer?
Absolutely.
Okay, so actually, you hit on a lot of things that I have already learned on my own through the experience of the last bid. So I know about the price matching, and I did that, but I was just like a few $1,000s off. So I did very good on that last bid, even though I didn't get it. I was very close. I came in second place. So I was encouraged to try again, and that's what I'm going to do. And the reason why I joined this meeting is because I feel like if I learned a little bit more, I would probably be successful in bidding against these big companies, because we are allowed to get the previous bid and look at what they did. So, I've been doing a lot of research in the last couple of months, and I appreciate your feedback on that, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about the price matching and how I should go about doing the bid, because I'm actually working on one right now as we speak. So this is very informative, and I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
We're gonna take one more. Chanel, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Hi. So my question was, so I've received a few bid notices on certain things that I have actually did like quotes and proposals for, but they have been in the past. Are we still able, like if they had a deadline for a certain time, can we still use that code or that application as a reference to submit a proposal if we've had an ongoing project that we've been trying to get, I guess, bid, get monies for? Like, so say like if I had a application, a bid application come in for the city of Raleigh and the Performing Arts Center, but that bid has the deadline for that application proposal has passed, but I already had a proposal already done that had a quote for that program. Am I able to still submit that proposal in for a bid for funding?
So you would really, I can't speak for the city of Raleigh, so I really don't know. I would advise you to contact them and ask that question. What I will say is typically deadlines are deadlines. So in order to be fair to all competitors, right, once the deadline has been reached, that's generally what it is. But I encourage you to reach out to the city of Raleigh to find out specifically how they are handling that. Not real sure around the piece that you stated around that. So there was an opportunity, there was a solicitation out, and you put together a bid. However, it was not submitted within the time frame that was indicated.
Right. So what it was so I already had like did like a proposal, like when developing my company and my small agency. I had already did certain proposals or did proposals to receive funding where I had to have been bonded with the state, and I actually did a contract for solicitation and fundraising. So I had already did all that, and then I had to do a payroll and workers' compensation. I guess it's the to ensure the employment, but I would not. And processing and doing all that, I was not able to receive the funding that I needed to establish my payroll and information. So I still have that proposal completed and done with different quotes. And what I'm trying to say is, so if a bid comes in, like with the leasing office in the project, are we still able to submit those proposals in, if it's been from the past, or do we need to look for another updated project to resubmit the proposal?
So I would encourage you to, when and if another proposal solicitation is put on the street, it should contain the information around the criteria in which certain information can be submitted. I don't think that there is a general yes or no answer to your question. So I think that it would just, each solicitation is going to be different and the requirements are going to be different. So I would say, I would only can offer that you would need to look at each one of them. Maybe there are some pieces of the information that you've already been able to collect that you will be able to use because the information haven't changed, or the nature of what they're asking for is the same. But I would have to say that you would need to look at each one of the solicitations and see what the requirements are.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and so we will move on. If we did not get your hand, this time we'll address it with the next section.
Thank you. All right, so in this section, we're going to talk about the different types of solicitation documents that are out there. What are the content of that solicitation document? And then we're going to talk about the criteria in terms of requirements versus the evaluation. What does that look like? So in the solicitation planning, usually it's completed at what you see there highlighted like in the red, those identifying the need and defining what that is, getting information together, what are the specifications you need, what's the scope of work if it's a more complex project. That's information that's completed at the end user level. My team gets involved with we don't identify the need because that's not what we do. We're purchasing, so we need the end user, the divisions, the departments to identify a need and help define. We will help them with with defining it, making sure that the solicitation document has the needed information that will help you vendor to decide if this is a project in which you are interested in and would like to offer to submit an offer for. We're going to review and authorize, right? We don't make any per se. I like to make sure people are clear. We review and approve award recommendations, which means that we are that piece that we're going to make sure that the procurement process is followed the way it is stipulated in the solicitation document that's out there. And so we're going to work with our end users to make sure that we do what we say we're going to do, that we have the proper documentation, and if all those items are as they should be, and then we will authorize the award and actually issue the purchase order. We're going to help with as well as preparing the solicitation document. And truth be told, we do, I would say 85% of it, which sounds like a lot, but a lot of that is what I call boilerplate language that's already, and we have templates for these documents, but we'll talk about those a little bit more in a second. Let's talk about the vendor direct quote, which is an EVP tool, and it's used for goods and services, typically up to $25,000. And the buyer, the purchaser, is able to select from a list of registered vendors. With the IRQ, the informal request for quote is another EVP tool that is used for goods or services. This one allows purchases up to $50,000. And again, You're able to add language or specifications as needed, and the buyer or the purchaser is able to select from a list of registered vendors. And then we have the RFQ, the request for quote. And it's a solicitation document that's typically used for non-advertised procurement. So we are going to send you via email. That is our standard way of doing that. We're going to email you a RFQ, a solicitation document in which we're asking you to complete and get back and email your response back to the procurement specialist that's identified who sent you the email, right? You're going to work directly with the vendor. You are using our document, so you are agreeing to the North Carolina terms and conditions. We use it both when we are having a waiver situation, but we also use it when we're seeking competition. So we can send this to more than one vendor at a time. It is possible for responses to come back via fax or email. I have strongly encouraged my team to use email and not fax, simply because we don't have a designated fax. That is just for our department, and the one that we do use is used by multiple departments, and we don't want any information, any RFQ coming back to us to be, mistakenly gathered up by someone else, and they put it on their desk. They don't look through their papers to see that they got something that really doesn't belong to them. And they're usually good, but they'll take it back to the copier room. But again, we're working within a certain window of time. So my team, you will get RFQs via email, and we do not do the fax thing. Versus advertised solicitation. If it's advertised, they're opened on the day and time that's indicated on that solicitation. With the RFQs, they're open upon receipt. So once we get your response back, we're going to take a look at it. We're going to go ahead and open and take a look at it. And then with the IFB, the invitation for bids, these are, we are seeking competition, and this is for what we call well-defined goods and simple services. Typically, we're using these when we're soliciting over $50,000. In this, the bids are going to be evaluated. It will state specifically inside the document what the evaluation criteria will be. And typically, these are the IFB is used when we are awarding based on the lowest responsive bid meeting specification and requirements. So your bid must be responsive, right? And we're going to base the award on the lowest price. And these are posted, and they have a minimum posting of 10 days. We have public bid openings, and it could be potential site visit. We'll talk about site visit in a few minutes as well. But for the public bid openings, what I would say is that is what it is. It's a public bid opening. So on the day and time in which that bid has been stated that we will open it or is due, then we will do that. We'll be in a location in which the public, and for NCDOT, we do it downstairs in our auditorium. If you wanted to attend those, you have every right to do so. However, you are also able to contact the procurement specialist that's identified on the IFB, and you could ask them to send you a copy of the bid opening sheet. So you could come here, or you can email the procurement specialist, and they'll provide you with the same information. The RFP, the request for proposals, these are, this document is used when we're doing a more complex service or a combination of goods and services, and these are typically well over $50,000. We use a proposal. Again, we use the IFB when the items are well defined, and we're asking for a simple service. Well, when the division or the business unit knows the end results, but we're looking for the vendor to give us some proposals on the best solution, the best way to get to our desired end result. That's why we're asking for a proposal. How do we get what we want? What's the best, according to what's currently on the market, right? What is the best way to get us what we want? And so we're asking for a proposal, which a solution is what and the evaluation method for these RFPs will be something other than lowest cost. Again, the evaluation criteria and the method of award will be identified inside of that document as well. These are also required to be posted for a minimum of 10 days. And again, will be a public bid opening, and it may have potential site visits. The RFI is a request for information. It is what it says. It's a request for information. This is not a solicitation. Therefore, there will be no award or offer as a result of it. Because there will be no contractual opportunity, there are no state terms and conditions that are attached to it. We are simply trying to gather information and ascertain whether there's a level of interest of potential vendors out there. And once we get the response period, the RFI will be canceled. Talk a little bit about these solicitation documents and the different sections of that. In section 1.0, the purpose and background. This is where the agency is going to give information about why they are making this purchase, and if there's any historical information that can be added there. We want to give you enough information to see whether you garners your interest is something that you think you can do, and you can service or good that you can provide for the state, understanding what they're going to use, who's going to use this for. NCDOT is a really large agency, so which one of our business units, which one of our divisions are going to be using this, and what they are going to do with it, and the expected outcome, what desired outcome of it. In section 2.0, that's just general information. That's where you will see the solicitation schedule, the question period. That's where you will find information on if there's a certain number of originals or copies that are required to be submitted. That information is there in section 2.0. In 3.0, you will see information on the method of award and the evaluation process. You're going to see that's where you also will see confidentiality information. The method of award will simply be one or two things. We're either going to award to the lowest cost of meeting the specification, or we're going to do what we call best value, and the award would be based on evaluation criteria and not focused on cost. While cost is certainly a part of it, it is not the main purpose, the main focus of the evaluation. In section 4.0, that's where you're going to see some basic, what I call boilerplate information. There, the contract terms typically is going to say it's 1 year with 2 one-year renewable options. You're going to get invoices, directions, if there's any warranties applicable to that. If we're requiring references, what type of vendor experience we're looking for. Are we going to do background checks? That information would be found in section 4.0. For 5.0, that's where you're going to see the scope of work. What are we looking for? What are the objectives, right? What tasks are involved? Are there any certifications that are needed? Product specifications, are there any deviations that are allowed? That information you will find in 5.0. In 6.0, that's where you're going to see the contract administration. We're going to ask the vendor to identify, in some cases, we will ask the vendor to, particularly for our proposals or our larger IFBs, we'll ask the vendor to identify a point of contact. Who's going to be your point of contact for this contract? We will also identify a point of contact on the agency's end. How are we going to handle any disputes? That language is there. If there are any needed contract changes, how are they going to be managed? And are there any reports that are required for this contract? That information could be found there. And then we will have some attachments to the solicitation document. That's where you're going to find your pricing form, you're gonna see North Carolina terms and conditions, that location of workers, supplier, supplemental information is there on Hub. If there are any maps that are required, if we're going to include any diagrams, there's a certification for financial condition that can be found there as well. So let's talk about briefly the documents of change, meaning, well, let me go into them. So addendum. So if once we have posted a solicitation on EVP, right, then if there's any changes that are needed to that posted document, the process we use to make those changes is called an addendum. That's not something that you would do nothing with that but gather the information. So what I encourage you all to do, if you are going to respond to a solicitation, please make sure you continue to check the same posting, because if there is any change in the solicitation posted document, then there would be a posted addendum. They're right there together. It's not like, one is on page 1 and the addendum is on page 50. It will be listed right under the listed solicitation. So for instance, if we want to change the questioning period, if the initial document says all written questions must be received by March the 15th, and we get to March the 14th and we haven't had any, we think we ought to get some, we may want to make a decision to add a couple more days to the questioning period. If that's so, we're going to post an addendum that clearly states that the written question period has been extended until, March the 21st, whatever that date is, right? So that information is there. Pay attention to the addendums. Some of them will require that you sign and include the signed document in your bid submission. And most cases, that is when the change that's been made is significant enough that we want you to certify for us that you saw in them, that your response is made with the information in the addendum, meaning you submitted your response having been made aware of the information that was in the addendum, right? Then they don't all have to be signed and returned. Please pay attention to the instructions that are there. Request for clarification, that is a document that we use after the bid opens. Once the bid has opened, when we are reviewing the bid submission, if we come across something that we want to make sure we are interpreting it the way that you intended, or then we're going to send you a request for clarification. Typically, they are yes or no kinds of things, right? We're going to have a box there, yes, a box for no. You check one, sign it, send it back, right? So the request for clarification will come after the bid opening, and there will be an email to you. So pay attention. Again, if you have submitted a bid, please pay attention to your emails for any further communications that may be coming. Then we have the BAFO, the best and final offer. This tool is only used when we're doing negotiations. So if we have a proposal that we solicited, that we advertised, and we have, let's say, 5 responses to that, we have evaluated the 5 responses based on the identified criteria, evaluation criteria, and of the 5, we have 3 top scoring vendors, right? And so we want to, and each 3, there's something about their proposal that we want to negotiate. So what we would do is, not identifying for any of the 3 who the other 2 are, we would send them individually an invitation to a meeting. And in that meeting, in the invitation, it'll be clearly identified what we want to talk about, who should be in the meeting, right? We need the folks in the meeting that can make a decision, right? So we need the person in your company that can say yes or no. That's not the meeting in which you need to take it back to someone, who can make a decision. The decision maker is required to be in that meeting, because at that meeting, we are going to come to some agreement on the items that we have questions about, right? And once that meeting is complete, we're going to send you this BAFO, best and final offer. It is not as many pages as the original advertised document. Is typically 2, 3, maybe 4 pages, but 4 would be a lot. It's really simple, because in addition to the original bid submission that you sent us, this document, this BAFO, because all those other items in that is still contractually binding, right? This BAFO is going to be where we will identify any additional changes that we may agreed upon in our negotiation meeting. It will be identified in this BAFO. You want to sign it and send it back, and then it, along with your original submission, becomes the contract. So, but we are not required to go into negotiations. So there's language in the solicitation documents that encourage you to always submit your best offer, because we're not required to negotiate. So we may make a decision just based on the offers that we get. An amendment, that is a tool that is used once we have awarded the contract and there is a need to make some changes. Even if the changes is to extend the contract for another year, right? We need to amend that. That is something that is agreed upon by both the vendor and the state. So if the contract has been awarded and there's a need to make changes or make additions to it within the contractual period, the tool that we use to do that is called an amendment. So these are bid submission, whether it's a bid or a proposal. We want to say that you need to pay particular attention to the language that's there. There are certain words that are used. If it says shall, must, or mandatory, that's what they mean. And so you need to follow them. Make sure you read the entire solicitation document carefully, right? Just because there are instructions that are there. There's vital pieces of information to help you understand what process is going to be used, how would award be made, if it's an evaluation that's going to be done, what will be evaluated, what information is needed to do that. The signature, please make sure you sign your agreement, sign your submission, because otherwise we do not have a binding contract and we can't do anything with it. I do this stipulation that there are a few cases in which I have only in my entire career only known it to be pertaining to, and this is really one time, pertaining to a proposal, RFP, a request for a proposal. In that, for proposals, we not only are you completing the document itself, but we also ask you to provide us with a letter of intent. A letter of intent. In that letter of intent, you're going to provide us what, the fact that your firm wishes to go into contract with the state, that you can meet the requirements, that, you had a qualified people on staff, talk about your agreement with the terms and conditions, and you want to date and sign that. So it has been determined that if for a request for proposal, if you have a letter of intent that is dated and signed, that's the same as contractually binding your company. But for IFBs, RFQs, there is no such thing that's included called the letter of intent. If your document is not signed, it's not a legal offer, and we can't do anything with it. So please pay attention to that. This is a sample solicitation schedule. Pretty simple. We will complete the right-hand side, the date and time, solicitation, what date was it posted. If we're gonna have a site visit or pre-bid meeting, the date and time will be listed there for that. There's a date and time for a deadline for submitting written questions. And this provides responses to questions. You probably are not going to see that line. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. But it's also it's a target date, right? It's a target date because all this information comes to my office because the procurement office manages the process from, pre-need identification to action to award. So all this information is coming into my office. We, depending upon the question, if it's a procurement question, we can answer that. If it's a technical question, we're going to send it back to the end user, right, to the subject matter experts, get the response from them. And then we're going to put them all on the table. And remember, I said that once we have a posted document, if we want to add any information, then we use what we call an addendum. So we're going to put the table that has the question, every question and every response on an addendum, and we're going to post that so that everyone is getting all the questions and all the responses at the same time. Submit bid, that is the date and time, the absolute date and time that you have to submit your response. We do not do late bids at all, period. There are no exceptions. It does not matter. If it's not where it's supposed to be at the date and time in which it's required, then we cannot do anything with it. Contract award, contract effective date, those may or may not be included on the schedule, but those are, again, target dates in which we are working towards. Vendor questions, please make sure if you have questions that you submit them in writing is really important. And you can only communicate once we have posted a solicitation. You can only communicate about that solicitation with the identified purchaser staff that's on for each solicitation. You're going to have a name, a email, and a phone number for the member on the procurement staff that is handling that particular solicitation. You should submit any questions you have to that individual that's identified in writing by the date that is for the written question period, right? I want to advise you that any questions that are answered in person or on the phone is not legally binding on the state. If you want a response to be legally binding included in the contract, then you need to submit your question in writing so that we can provide your response in writing, and that information becomes contractually binding on the state's behalf. Again, all written questions that are submitted by the deadline will be answered and posted to the EBP or the tool that we use to solicit. And again, we'll do that via an addendum. Mentioned site visits, they can be identified as one or two things. So, site visit is only necessary if we think that it's either a real need or we really think you ought to physically see the location so that you can gather the information you need to make a responsible submission, right? The site visit is going to be identified as either mandatory, which means that you have to be there in order for your bid to be reviewed, right? You got to be there on time, right? You got to sign in and sign out, right? Late vendors, you can attend, but we will not be accepted, nor can you sign in. We're going to take the sign-in sheet up at the time that the site visit begins, right? Again, during that site visit, information is shared. If you have a question, again, while it can be answered at that site visit, if you want the answer from the state to be legally binding on the state, even though you asked your question at the site visit and it was answered, send the written question, right? So the site visit would take place before the end of the written question period. So you still have time to send your question in the written form to the individual identified. So make sure you do that if you want the state to be legally binding to what their response is. If we think you ought to, but if you you don't think you ought to, then it's going to be identified as site visit as urged and cautioned, right? We think you ought to come. We're going to give you a specific date, time, and location, just as we do with the mandatory ones. We'll have someone there. We will ask you to sign in. If you're late. That's up to you. That's, we're going to start the meeting, start the visit at the time that we indicated. So attendance is not a requirement, so therefore we will review in the offers that we receive on urgent caution, whether you was at the site visit or not, right? Urgent caution, we think you ought to be there, but if you don't, for whatever reason, can't make it there, if you want to submit a offer, we will still review and that offer. Mandatory site visits, you must be there on time, stay there entire time, sign in, and we will review your inner offer that you make for that. Submittal instructions, I think it's important that you make sure, again, read the solicitation. You're going to find information there that talks about processes, deadline, mandatory return information, mandatory site visits, or whatever. And so those are the different tools in which submittals can be sent in, but that information would be specific to that particular solicitation. So it's important that you read the document. This screen, is talking about vendor requirements, and the takeaway here is that specifications that a vendor must meet or submit with this proposal and to be found responsive, right? So requirements that are yes or no are not evaluated, right? There's nothing to evaluate. It's either yes or no, right? So the first example there is that the vendor must deliver the product within 15 consecutive calendar days of award, right? Of received purchase order. Of received purchase order. So if we have that requirement, right below there, you will see there's going to be a line that says vendor can deliver product and a space for you to answer how many consecutive calendar days. If we require 15 and you say that you can deliver it in 20, then your bid is not responsive. So because it cannot meet our requirements, and we will not evaluate it any further. So pay attention to those requirements. Let's talk about the evaluation criteria a little bit. This is really how the vendor plans to complete the project, and what would the state be evaluating. That's what you're going to see there. Those are just some examples of possible criteria. We're going to look at the vendor experience, past relative experience, that was for projects either public or private, right? That is a similar or greater size and complexity for what we're looking for. So have you done this kind of work previously, whether it was for a public entity or a private entity or something on the same scale of what we're looking for? Then we want to know that, and we're going to ask you for that information. If it's a more proposal kind of request, or a more complex IFB even, we may ask you who's going to perform the work, right? Identify the experience and knowledge of the staff that would be assigned to our projects. We're going to also, there will be some type of technical approach, right? How do an opportunity for you to provide that? How would the vendor meet the state business requirements? Like, what are you going to do? It's typically done in a narrative format, which means written out, whether it's a Word document or however, that how are you going to accomplish the task that's outlined in the scope of work if it's an RFP, right? Kind of describe each task and the delivery and the schedule for accomplish each one. So, if that is what is required, that information will be in the evaluation criteria section. So pay particular attention to that. If you have a question about that, it's important to ask that question during the question period, right? So when the document is posted, you get a notification. Please read through that. If you have some questions, make sure you submit your questions during the question period. Questions?
All right, I think I've answered the questions in the chat, and we can go to hands raised. I want to start with Phil, who has patiently waited from the last section. So Phil, unmute and ask your question.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
have a question about history of awards. Before submitting a bid, it would be helpful to see past awards. For example, hypothetically, let's say I sell dill pickles. I see that the contract for pickles at the local college has just expired and they're seeking bids. Can I see what were the terms of the previous award so I know what would be a competitive bid?
You certainly can ask for that information. Field agencies are managing how that's done differently. For NCDOT, that is called a public records request. And so you will send in the public record request, and information will be sent to me, actually. And then I will get the information from my staff and be able to send it back. That is a good way to get historical data, as you stated. My caution with that is that doesn't make it a winning bid, right? So just that's information to help you determine what's the best offer that you can make. Because just like we can provide the information to you, vendor A, we also can provide the information to vendor B, C, D. So we all look, you all can kind of be looking at the same thing. I just caution you, again, I say that is a great way. Public records request is a great way of getting information around what was previously awarded, see the document that was submitted, see all the documents, whether it was awarded or not. You can see all of them once the solicitation has been awarded. So yes, absolutely, Phil, that's a great way of doing it.
Okay, thank you. And that public records request should be sent to the agency that has posted the position?
So you need to find out from each agency handles public records requests differently. For NCDOT, all public records requests have to go through our communications department, and they would send it to me, right? So, when I worked at previous other agencies, it was handled differently. You could send it right into the procurement director or manager, and they would provide the response. So find out I would reach out at least to the person identified on the solicitation. How can you get previous history on previous awards for that? And they should tell you how their agency handled public records requests.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next hand raised, Purcell.
Yes, it's me again. I have a question. First of all, my business is CCTV Master, and what we do is we clean and inspect pipes underground, stormwater, wastewater, and water. And usually on a contract, it's going to be a construction contract, and we submit our portion of it as a sub for the most part. So we don't actually bid the contract. So how do we as a hub zone correlate what we do with the Department of Transportation?
If I understand your question correctly, I think that it sounds like, I hope you have been in also along with the whole certification, that maybe, there are some other certifications that are specific to NCDOT on the construction side of the house. So hopefully you've been in touch with our Office of Civil Rights to make sure that you are getting the information from that as well. But
where's that again?
The Office of Civil Rights. That's within.
Yeah. I'm a DBE as well.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm not real. What do you mean? How, as a sub, how do you? So you are still a vendor if the work that you were doing is most likely being captured by Prime,
right.
Then You are still a vendor. I'm not sure I understand your question. What do you mean by how do you as a sub be identified by DOT? Well, you will have to submit your response as a prime, if that's what you want to do. But if you are going under someone else, then the bid is really from the prime and not from the sub.
That's what it is. I have to bid as a sub with a prime, so all of my information goes to the prime.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
And
Okay.
so yes, you're right. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Question from Ty.
Hi, guys. Good morning.
Good morning.
My question is, I see the solicitations and the bids. As a small business owner, I am a team of one. So my question is, some of these contracts are super, super huge. And so I don't go for them because as a solo person, I'm not able to fulfill that need. But are there ever any needs in any of the offices for pastries and baked goods for meetings or events? And if so, are those captured in those solicitations? Or do you guys, is that something you pick up yourselves? Or do you ever look for small businesses that can provide things for like your meetings or your events, something on a smaller scale?
So we do, but those are not going to be advertised, obviously, because even as you stated, they are going to be some of the smaller purchases that we do. So I would just make sure that, again, you are identified correctly as that is what you offer, right? I will also go a step further and, reach out to each of the agency procurement offices to let them know. Again, most of the agencies now have hub vendor liaisons just to make sure that they are aware that you are out there and that is something that you would like to offer should the opportunity come up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we will take our final question from Faith. Faith, if you want to ask your question.
Yes, I just wanted to respond to the young lady that just asked the question, because I'm a bakery as well and I'm by myself as well, but I wanted to let her know that she can bid for some of those big contracts, but if she has a supplier, I was told that I don't have to bake everything. I can use my own supplier. So that's a way that she could get around some of the big contracts, like she could bid for the bread contracts.
All right, thank you for that, Faith. And so Ty, it seems like you may need to connect with Faith for a little collaboration and mentoring. All right, so that was our last question. Jody, we can proceed on.
Thank you. In this section, we are going to discuss direct submittal, collaborative e-procurement, as well as solicitation, search, and response in EVP. These are the different ways or options to submit your proposal or bid submissions. And so you can do it either the direct submittal over email. Again, those are the tools that are listed there that are typically used for those. Email types of responses. We talked about the different tools that are within EVP and the different methods of providing or submitting your information through that. Again, it's important to read the solicitation document to see which method would be used for that specific solicitation. They don't all use the same method. So I would encourage you to make sure you read that in that document to make sure that you are responding in the appropriate way. So we'll talk about the collaborative space just briefly. This is, again, we have mentioned it something similar to it previously. This is the informal quoting and pricing request that's within our electronic system. It is used for the obtaining of quotes for goods and services for multiple vendors at the same time, so they're able to select vendors to send it out to. Typically, it is for purchases that are up to $50,000, and you are required to agree to our terms and conditions in which you would be able to indicate in there that you agree to the terms and conditions. There is a link there that you can go to and take a look at just to familiarize yourself more with what this space looks like and how it's used. EVP solicitation, search and response. This is for our more formal type of solicitations, the IFB and the RFP. It allows the state agency to seek open and fair competition. It's a place where we're going to post once we've opened the bid, we're going to post our tabulations there. And we will also post our contract award information there. What it allows you, the vendor, to do, again, it's a 24/7 search for business opportunity. It's a free registration EVP that allows you to get notifications when there are opportunities posted according to your identified commodity codes. And again, you also can be able to view the both the tabulation, the opening at the opening of the bid, the tabulation, as well as once the bid has been awarded, the award information. This is a just a screenshot or the EVP portal. You can just kind of see the different things that are identified there where you would sign in with an existing login, where you can register if that's what you need to do, and also where you're able to search and respond to solicitations. This is just a example of a solicitation page there. And here, if you click on that response to solicitation, it gives you access to the sourcing tool event that will that you will be able to respond to. This is links to e-procurement. So you're going to get this presentation, so you'll be able to do that. Of course, remember that you have to have an EVP username and password to respond electronically. And obviously you need to be registered with EVP to do that. This is another example of the sourcing event page. And if you, again, click on these indicated, I'll bring your attention to the top right-hand corner where it says time remaining. There's a countdown clock there that tells you how much time is remaining for the solicitation opening, right? In other words, that's how much time you have left to be able to submit your bid. So pay attention to that. If you want to review any required prerequisites, there's a section for that, as well as there's a checklist of steps that you could take in the content section. Are there any questions?
No questions in the chat. I think I've cleared those, and no hands raised. And so this, we can move forward, Joni.
Okay, thank you. In this section, we're going to talk about the evaluation process, specifically bid openings, evaluation methods, whatever, the reference check section, the Executive Order 50, and clarifications and BAFOs. So the bid and proposal opening is really part of the formal bid process. Anything that we advertise will have a bid opening. Date and time indicated is publicly done. As stated, you have every right to attend. However, you also have the option of emailing the identified procurement specialist there and asking for the bid opening tabulations, which you can receive electronically. Late bids and proposals are not accepted. If you do choose to attend the bid opening, there will be an attendance that is taken just so that for the record, who was present at the time of the opening. Another thing I like to stipulate is that pricing would not be disclosed at the bid opening if the negotiations are anticipated. So particularly for our larger items, then you would get the name of the vendors who submitted an offer and not necessarily the price that they submitted, because we anticipate going into negotiations with that. And so we're not going to provide that information until after award. But for typical ones, you will be able to get both the vendor name and the amount that they submitted. Talk a little bit about evaluation methods. And so there are really two kinds. The low cost meeting specification is often called low cost meet spec. You hear it in the trade. That's what we say. That is where your bid meets all the requirements of the solicitation. And it's the lowest that's offered to the agency. And that is who we're going to award that to under those conditions. And we have the other way is best value, and you can do best value in one or two ways. You can do the weighted method, which is, again, different components can have different weights that's assigned, and all that information will be included in the solicitation document, so you'll know what that weight is for each different criteria that's going to be evaluated. The weights will add up to 100 or some multiplication of 100. Then we have the narrative method, which is a personal favorite of mine, but it is not the only method that we can use. But this is where it enables you to be able to offer the most appropriate product solution to meet the business objective. And then the narrative method is really speaking to when we evaluate it, we're going to really speak to what we call strengths and weaknesses. And if it's a strength, if identified as a strength, what we really are saying is that we think that this component of your response makes the potential success or the contributes exceedingly towards the contract requirements, right? So if it's a strength, we think it's a component that is on target for the success of the solution that you're offering. If we think if it's identified as a weakness, we're basically saying we think that there's a flaw that increases the risk. So you are increasing the risk of being unsuccessful if it's identified as a weakness. Now, there's not an overall that is for each evaluation criteria is going to be evaluated, and we're going to list the strengths and if there are any weaknesses or if there are any strengths. So it's individually done. And we are not doing a comparison of vendor to vendor. We're doing a comparison of vendor solution to the required evaluation criteria that was previously identified. So I want to be clear about that. We are evaluating against the criteria and not against another vendor. Reference checks. Is really used, of course, to confirm that the vendor has performed the service or offered a product in the same size and scope and job performance previously. It can be added to the solicitation document. It may or may not be there. It can be made as a requirement. So again, it's important that you read the document to make sure if references are required or not required. If they are required, or if it says must be or may be called, it'll indicate that whether we will call or we may not call. Either way, we're going to do it the same for every bid that's submitted, right? We either going to call every reference or we're going to call no reference. It's going to be standard across the board. Our submission will be handled in the same way, regardless of the risk of reference check. So I think that's important to know. We're going to have identified questions that we're going to ask. We're going to ask the same questions to every reference, right? We're going to document who we talked to, what time, and what date. Clarification and baffles. We'll spend a lot of time because we talked about those previously. Remember, request for clarification. that is the tool that we will use once the bid has opened and we have a question about your bid submission. We will send you a request for clarification. You will respond to that and email it back to us. The BAFO, the best and final offer, that is a tool that we use if we go into negotiations after the initial review of your bid submissions, right? Price match, we kind of mentioned that before previously. This is where we offer a price matching opportunity for a North Carolina vendor. You must be headquartered in North Carolina, right? And the vendor must indicate when you submit your response if you want to participate in price matching. And your price must be within 5% or $10,000 of the non-resident vendor in order to be able to be offered the price matching opportunity. And this is used for goods and not services, so strictly pertaining to goods. So, are there any questions?
We do have one question in the chat. Well, actually, a couple of questions. Question from Lance. For general contractor projects, does the CG have to be the Hub certified vendor, or can the I think GC be a partner of the vendor?
I would think that so I think that question is more of a construction question. So I guess the GC is a general contractor, and I don't know about specifically a Hub qualification for that. There may be something in the DBE arena that would be some type of certification that would be advantageous to have, but I don't know of a situation to answer your question in which either the sub or the prime has to have Hub certification or the B2CG.
All right. Next question. My company offers office supplies and PPE supplies. However, I have a relationship with vendors in the trucking and construction services. Can I also bid on those fields and hire this vendor as subcontractors? Do these vendors need to be Hub certified as well?
Again, that is more of a construction side of the house question. I think that there are sometimes pre-qualification requirements that are in place, and so it would really just depend on a couple of things, right? It's no standard yes or no answer to your question. So I would advise you to get in contact with Nicole Giammi, that's on my team, and she can get you in contact with folks that can provide you with more specific. Once you can provide more specific, they could provide you with a more appropriate answer.
And I will drop Nicole's contact information again. It's already in the chat if you want to scroll up to see it. All right, no more questions in the chat, and I see no hands raised. And so we can move on, Joni.
Thank you. In this section, we're going to talk about award notification, purchase orders, and invoicing. So award notification, that's really the purchasing office sending out a certificate of award. This document will also be attached to the purchase order. It will be posted to EVP the goal is within 3 days. And I believe it should be posted there for 30 days that you'll be able to go back and look once the award has been made. Once the award has been made, that really ends my office participation unless there is a question about a contract amendment. If there's a vendor complaint, then my office would be pulled back in. After award, at that point, you will work directly with the end user or the identified contract administrator. Purchase orders, this is just a list of some information that's included on there. You're going to see description of items or services than which we have purchased. You're going to see delivery schedules, payments, terms and conditions will be there as well. And if there's any comments to the vendor, you will see that on the purchase orders. Invoicing, I think the takeaway here is to make sure that your remit to address is current in the EVP system. Typically, the state pays in net 30. NCDOT, we write checks on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's important information to keep in mind. Are there any questions?
No questions in the chat. Does anyone want at this time to unmute and ask a question? Please do so. And no takers on that, Jody, so let's roll forward.
All right, in this section, we're going to talk about contract management, inspections and testing. We're going to talk about contract renewals and amendments, vendor protests, and then that public records request. So a contract kickoff meeting, that's really after the contract has been awarded. At this meeting, the end user and the awarded contract, the awarded vendor would meet to talk about the clarify terms and conditions and make sure everybody has the same understanding and clarify goals and objectives. Again, everyone's on the same page with regard to that. They're going to communicate roles and responsibility. It's just a meeting, a kickoff meeting because previously, remember, the vendor has been dealing with the procurement office and not with the end user. So this is the kickoff meeting in which the vendor would then be working directly with the end users. And it's a point of clarification and communication. Inspection and testing. The state is going to notify the vendor, of course, obviously, if we have receive any damaged goods, if there's some type of order inaccuracy, or if the shipment is late. Quality exception inspection, that is done, is not considered to be done, or delivery is not considered to be done until after the installation has been completed, and that includes disposal of waste and debris from the site. So that's important to know. And the invoices will not be paid until the agency completes the inspection and goods are accepted, if that is part of the requirement, right? For vendor complaints, the contract administrator, the person who's identified once the contract has been awarded, is to be the point of contact. That contract administrator will talk to hopefully the vendor and identify what the concerns are, and you're able to work that out at a satisfactory level on both sides at that level. If it is not able to do, then the contract administrator has a responsibility to bring my office back into it, to bring purchasing back into it, and then it becomes more of a formal process in which we are going to issue a letter of cure, which is an opportunity to for correction of actions. So renewals are basically what they are. It says we're going to renew renewals, as I stated, most standard contract terms is for 3 years, but that is with 1 year and 2 renewable options. That is strictly upon the states, which means that do not have to be exercised. Typically they are, but please know that they don't have to be. But we'll notify the vendor either way towards the end of the contract, the initial contracting period. Again, amendments, that's the tool that is used if we need to change anything in the contract after the contract has been awarded. And the only legal person who can, or office who can change the terms of a contract, it has to be done through the procurement office, right? So just make sure procurement is involved with that. Vendor protests. This is an opportunity that if once we have awarded a contract and you believe that the award has not been done according to what was stipulated in the solicitation document, right? So that's another reason why it's important for you to know what does that document say, right? If you believe that we have made an award that is not consistent with the language that is in the solicitation document, then, and you want to issue us or submit a protest to that award, then you must submit it in writing, right? And you have to submit it within 30 consecutive calendar days from the date of the contract award. And your letter must contain specific reasons and any supporting documentation that you will have for the reason for your protest. Again, it must be submitted within 30 consecutive calendar days from the date of the contract award, and it must be in written form, and it must contain specific reasons and any supporting documentation that you will have to support your position that you've taken. Public records requests. Again, these are handled differently per the agents or our agency. So I would strongly request that you are advised that you reach out to the agents specifically to see how they process public records requests. But once a solicitation has been awarded, it is at that point considered to be public information with the exception of any identified confidential information. So if a vendor has identified some information in their proposal and their response as confidential, one, my office would have reached out to the vendor during the review process, right? During the review process to certify or reaffirm that you have identified this information as confidential. And we're also going to notify you that if you insist on it remaining confidential, then we are not going to release it during any public records request. We will not release confidential information. If the person requesting the public records request chooses to sue, go to court to get that information released, then the state, when we send you a clarification, we're going to notify you. At that point, the state will not go to court for you. You will have to take on the responsibility and the expense of defending why your information is confidential. So we're going to send that to you in a clarification. You must sign it to send it back, because we want to be clear about we're not going to get this information out. If it becomes a matter of law, then you are going to have to defend that, whether, however it goes, right? So, and the other piece about that is that pricing is never confidential, ever. Ever. So we will never not give someone your pricing. Even if you identify in your response as confidential, we're going to send you something that tells you that it is not confidential, and we will release the information. These are a list of websites that I think are resourceful for you to be able to use. Again, you're going to get the presentation, so you will be able to see those as well. Paula, are there any final questions?
There are no questions in the chat. I will open just for a few quick questions before we close out. And I see Portia has her hand raised. If you want to unmute and ask, Portia.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My question was just a follow-up question to what was the proper term to request a previous winning bid?
Public records request.
Public records request. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Was there a time frame? There isn't a time frame. As long as it has been awarded, you could request it. But the more information that you provide in your public records request, the more we're able to provide you with the information you're requesting, right? So there is no time limit on that. So as long as it has been awarded, as long as it has been awarded And most record retention requirements for the state is 5 years after the contract ends. So if you want something for 25 years ago, we probably don't have that information.